Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPAutos.com, your libertarian car guy. Came across some unsettling news that I hope turns out to not be true about what might be in store for the Mazda Miata. You may have already heard the rumors that Mazda is contemplating canceling the Miata, if you can imagine that. The Miata is one of Mazda's most successful models. It's been around since what, like 1989, I think? Really long time, and one of its most iconic, one of its most popular models. However, it hasn't been selling as well as it used to, and I think there are a variety of reasons for that. And probably the most obvious reason is that it is getting to be a pretty pricey car. It is nearly $30,000 to start. The MSRP for the base model is something like $28,300. So, that's getting awfully close to $30,000, and that's an awful lot of money to spend on a little two-seat sports car. And I think the problem, related to that is that people don't have the money anymore, by and large, to own two cars. One that's not very practical, because Miata is a two-seat roadster with a little trunk. It's a lot of fun. I'm a huge fan, but it's really not very practical. It's great as a commuter. It's great as a second car, great as a track day car. But particularly if you're married, and especially if you have kids, there's just no way a Mazda Miata is going to cut it as your primary family car. So that puts people in this position of having to pick. What are they going to get? Are they going to get the impractical car, or are they going to get the practical car? Since they can't afford both, you guessed it, they're generally speaking going to get the practical car, which is probably going to be a crossover or an SUV that has four doors, has room, can carry the kids around, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's really what the problem is. The Miata is as appealing as a driver's car, as a fun car, as it has ever been, but man, it's gotten expensive. I remember, because I've been doing this a long time, I've been writing about cars professionally since the mid-1990s, and back then, a Miata was an easy buy. It was pretty inexpensive. I can't remember exactly what the MSRP was when the first generation models came out, but I'm going to spitball it and say it was probably somewhere in the vicinity of half the cost of what the new one is, at least in terms of the dollar amounts. Now, yeah, I know, I understand inflation, blah, 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 but as I've written about before, the thing about inflation is that incomes haven't kept pace. In other words, the cost of things, what you have to pay in terms of how many dollars you have to put on the table, is higher now, and most people are not being paid an equivalent sum in more dollars to compensate for that. That's the problem. That's why things have gotten to be essentially luxury items that were once commonplace items for regular people to buy. Now, circling back to what I heard, apparently Mazda is considering making the next generation a hybrid Miata. I think that would be disastrous for two main reasons. First is, it would obviously increase the cost. I don't see how they could make it less expensive than it already is. You're talking about adding a hybrid augmentation to a drivetrain means additional components. Minimally, even if it's just a so-called mild hybrid, you're still talking about an additional battery pack, not just the 12-volt starter battery that starts the engine, but a battery pack that stores up electricity to run things like a high-torque secondary start system that is used in these mild hybrids to keep the engine, to restart the engine, which is cycled off constantly, not just when you roll up to a red light, as part of the attempt to reduce gas mileage and increase gas mileage and reduce emissions of the dread gas carbon dioxide. Anyhow, so, more than likely that would push the price of a base trim Miata well over $30,000, and I just don't see how that is going to be conducive to selling more of them. I don't think people who buy Miatas are, particularly anxious about gas mileage, and the Miata's gas mileage is actually pretty good. It's not that far off of the mileage of what you get out of an economy car. I think it gets, I don't know, probably 35 miles per gallon, something like that on the highway, which is very good mileage. Certainly it's not terrible mileage. Anyhow, the reason that they're doing it, in case you're wondering or contemplating doing it, is the same reason that all the other manufacturers are doing it or contemplating doing it, which is that they have to deal with these compliance issues. The federal government says you have to get ever higher gas mileage. The federal government says you have to reduce gas emissions. This is just a constant thing for them. So, that's the reason why you're seeing these mild hybrids proliferating everywhere. It's no longer just the case that they're a handful of them on the market for people who value that. It's just being pushed onto everything. So, that may be the reason why Mazda is considering doing it, but if they do it, it's going to make matters worse for the Miata, at least in terms of the cost. There's another factor as well, though, that I think is probably at least as potentially damaging, was I think it would make the car less fun. Certainly it's going to make it heavier, necessarily. And one of the things that people want in a high-performance sports car is lightweight. You want to feel agile, not ponderous. And the Miata has long been a kind of latter-day emulation of that concept, pioneered by cars like the old Lotus 7, which were very light. They've even today managed to keep the car's curb weight down to, I think it's about 2,700 pounds, which for a modern sports car is quite light. Anyhow, minimally, they're going to add weight to it by making it a mild hybrid. And then I think they're going to detract from the driving of it, regardless, or in addition to the compounding problem of the weight issue. Because it's, I don't know, you got this one, the current, let me back up and try to be a little more articulate. The current Miata, and all Miatas made since '89, have this wonderful drivetrain with this high revving 4-cylinder engine, and I feel like adding that hybrid element to it is just going to take away from that, and it will kill it if they make it an automatic only. I think that's what I was getting at, because I think the problem with this mild hybrid and hybrid generally setup is that it's more challenging from an engineering point of view to make it a manual. So more than likely it will end up being an automatic. And I know they're going to talk about, well, we can program this automatic to just shift so smartly, so quickly, so consistently, and all of that is absolutely true and entirely beside the point when you're talking about a car such as a Miata, a 2-seat high-performance roadster, a sports car. People who like cars like that like to shift for themselves, even if it means that they're going to miss a shift, or they're going to shift too soon or shift too late. It's part of the art of driving the car. You take that away from people, and you take away their reason for lusting after the vehicle. Right now I'm driving this otherwise really fun to drive BMW 2 Series Grand Coupe. A lot of fun to drive in the sense that it's got great grip, good steering response, well-balanced car. But, it's automatic only, and the automatic only thing just really takes away from the fun, the visceral, emotional engagement that you used to get driving BMWs that had manual transmissions. I hate to see this trend. It's just another thing that's taking the fun out of driving. Anyway, I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope the rumors are wrong, and that Mazda commits to keeping the Mazda Miata as it is, please. And if anything, I wish they could figure out a way to just bring the price down. And surely that's possible. I understand the compliance costs, but maybe they could do what car makers used to do, which is de-content the car. That term meant in the past that a vehicle might not have some of the luxury items that are now standard in everything, such as air conditioning, which frankly in a Miata you don't really need it. You can get away with not having air conditioning in a little car like that that's a convertible, and you could engineer an excellent vent system to cool down the cabin. It's certainly feasible, and that would be one way to lop some money off of it. And another thing would be to just bring the airbag count down to the absolute minimum required by the law. Instead of 4, how about just 2? Again, I think the bulk of the people who would want a car like a Miata don't give a damn about airbags and would be fine with no airbags. Of course, we're not allowed that, but they certainly don't want 4 or 6 airbags. You get rid of those stupid airbags and you can dramatically lower the cost of the car. Get rid of a bunch of other extraneous stuff. Surely it could be done. And I think if they could bring the price of that car back down to around $24,000, they'd sell a whole lot more of them. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. More over at epautos.com, the web's best libertarian gearhead site. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll have more for you again soon.